Okay, now we're live, and I'm here with two special people, Scott Martin and Dean Proctor from the Mind Matters podcast. You can find them on Facebook, Mind Matters, and we're here tonight to talk about panic attacks. And so I actually don't know if Dean has had panic attacks, but I know that Scott struggles with them, and I think I think every minister that I've met actually has struggled with them at one point in their life, and I seem to be encountering a lot of people now that struggle with them. So let's talk about it for a bit. And the first question I have, and I'll just hand it over to the smartest one of you, is what is a panic attack?
Dean, you should take this one. You've got the glasses.
Okay, I'll start, but then you jump in.
Okay.
So recently, we did offered a mental health first aid course at our church, and so there are some specific things that go with panic attacks. And at the time that we recorded our first podcast on it, I didn't have as much information as I thought I had, and then following that, I felt a little better prepared to talk about it. And in fact, it was the first time we had to do a two-part podcast because there was just so much to talk about. The main thing that we've sort of used to define panic attacks is just those unprovoked, unexpected, not circumstantial, just out of nowhere times where your body just completely do I want to say freezes? That's not the right word, but where your body just is reacting to something like in a fight or flight type mode that's not actually there. I mean, your mind, for all intents and purposes, says that it's there, but there's not actually something there. You know what I mean? Scott, you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed the key right there. There's perceived risk and actual risk in life, and when a panic attack happens in sort of that mental health aspect, it's when there's not actually an actual risk involved, where it's just something your brain perceives as a threat. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a panic attack yesterday morning. My wife was trying to get some stuff sorted out with a government agency. She wanted to hand the phone over to me. She didn't tell me that it was going to happen, and I just started freaking out. I pulled the cover up over my head. I was trying to breathe, normally. I just lost it, all because she had sort of brought to me that I was going to need to talk to somebody that I wasn't prepared to talk to. Was there any risk? No, there was nothing at all. But for some reason, my mind manifested this huge issue in as far as how I responded physically. And with the panic attacks, that's a lot of times what it is. There's nothing really to worry about. It's over things that you can't change, things that are just in life, sometimes things that don't exist at all. And it doesn't matter how you try to talk yourself down. Sometimes you can't focus on just grasping that everything is okay.
And so what are the things that your body might feel if you're having like a panic attack?
Let's see. Dean used the word freeze, and that's a good one, because your chest can tighten. You can all of a sudden feel like your chest does freeze, like it's hard getting air into your lungs. Your breath can be very erratic. You can get dizzy. I've passed out before during a panic attack. I know other people who have fainted as well during a panic attack. Your mind doesn't process things logically, so doing simple tasks can be very, very difficult. Answering even a yes or no question sometimes is next to impossible. So
Adam, I know you're a father. Scott used a great example on one of our podcasts one time of the sensation, the feeling. Imagine, Adam, that you're walking through a mall. Do they have malls in Dryden?
No, we don't.
Okay, all right. Imagine you're walking through the general store in Dryden then.
Okay.
And your daughter is there with you, and you stop, and for 2 seconds you look at something on a shelf, you turn around, and she's not there. And the physical response that would go through your body at that moment is how Scott has described, I think correctly, what your body goes through in a panic attack, but it lasts for 5, 10, 15 minutes, perhaps even longer. But it's that feeling, that fight or flight, that I don't know what to do, and I'm scared to death right now. Now, again, the difference being in a panic attack, as we're talking about them, there isn't a cause for it. It isn't like something just happened that has caused your body to react that way. Your body has just reacted that way.
Mm-hmm.
I had an anxiety attack on Sunday between our worship services. That was the first in a while. It came on about the end of our 9 o'clock service and through the sort of the intermission time before our 11 o'clock service, and I ended up in my office sitting in the dark just trying to get my act together. There was no reason. There was no situation that caused it. It just came on, and I had to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to comment that I've encountered people that are afraid to go outside. And they're afraid to go outside because they think they're going to have a panic attack.
Yeah.
And so it's this vicious cycle that your mind is in, and you can't get them to go outside because they're scared that you're going to have a panic attack. And when they go outside, they have that panic attack, and it just goes on and on and on. And it seems to be a pretty hard cycle for people to break out of.
Yeah, it's agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is not so much the fear of you better explain what that is.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Okay. So yeah, I've recently had my well, there's two of us here. It could have been someone else. I've recently had my family doctor say that it sounds like, or it seems like, I'm on the beginning stages of agoraphobia. And you sort of nailed it fairly well. It's almost like self-fulfilling prophecy.
No, hold on. You're explaining the wrong thing.
What am I explaining?
I wanted you to explain what was just in your mouth.
What was in my mouth?
Yeah. It looks suspicious.
Oh, my e-cig?
Yes.
Yeah. Some of us deal with anxiety in different ways. I like the hand and mouth motion. What can I say?
There you go. I just, like, this is going to go worldwide, and I didn't want Reverend Hillmanhawk here to get in trouble.
E-cigs I'm okay with, but not so sure about the legalization of what Jabo wants to do. But
don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
Hey, it'll calm you down, Dean.
Agoraphobia, again, we think it's the fear of wide open spaces, and that's not the issue. It's the fear of what might happen while you're outside in that wide open space.
Yeah. And it is that self-fulfilling prophecy almost, in that you have, like myself, so I've got the e-cig, but then I also at the same time, like, these e-cigs helping me cut back on smoking. So I'll go outside, and hopefully I'm not offending anyone, but I'm just going to be honest about my life here. I'll go outside to have a smoke, but I'm nervous about it ahead of time, because what if someone's walking down the street and wants to chat? So agoraphobia is actually a wonderful way to deal with, cutting back on smoking, because you see someone walking down the street, toss it, time to go in. But it's that fear of, will I bump into someone? Will someone just walking down the street want to talk about the weather? Who knows? It's the simplest, smallest things. And right. For me, that's what really just keeps me from wanting to leave, is just this fear of the unknown. And my mind creates the unknown and makes it, just the silliest, smallest reasons to stay inside.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So are you able to work then?
No.
Oh, no?
No. So I've been unemployed for almost 2 years now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, actually just over 2 years. So that's been very hard. it's a really hard process going through the recovery stages of it, because it's a step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, it's just this constant movement and motion, and there's sometimes no end in sight. So I guess it's not really related to panic attacks, but it could be when it feels like you're not able to get a handle on anything. There can seem like there's no end in sight, but there is. It's just the process has a lot of backward steps in it.
Adam, one of the things that we always say on our podcast, we probably should have said this up front too, is that neither Scott or I are in any way, shape, or form any form of professional when it comes to this. We're simply two guys that deal with it, and have tried to connect the dots between what we encounter in our lives and in our heads with our pursuit of Christ, and how do we reconcile the two, and how do we live out, if interacting with people and engaging people is an anxiety creating thing, how does a person attend worship in a case like that? And so we talk about these things, about how to bring these two things together, and how to not over spiritualize things like this. I have depression and anxiety. I'm not demonic. I have prayed about it. Thank you very much. You don't have to remind me that prayer is an important thing. I've sought the scriptures. So these are sort of some of the things that we encounter as Christians dealing with mental illness in the church. If society at large isn't very good at responding to it, the church is horrible.
The church is absolutely ridiculous. In all the different jobs I've worked, I've had a fairly easy time talking to coworkers about things like stress, things like anxiety, all that, as you start to build relationships. But in the church, it always seems so much different, because you have those experiences where people do all of a sudden tie it to your spiritual health. You're having anxiety attacks. Well, either A, you're not praying enough, or B, are you really walking with God right now? Are you really that close to God if you're depressed?
What's the unconfessed sin in your life?
Exactly. That's it right there. And so, you really start to shell up once you've had a few of those experiences, because they can, basically inform you of what every experience will be like in that self-fulfilling prophecy kind of way, of where you just end up closing up.
Now, Adam, again, to be clear, and I think I can speak for Scott too. I mean, the church, the biblical church, we love the church. The church is the bride of Christ, right? I mean, I'm not slagging on the church. I'm simply saying, and in fact, our particular congregation, I think, is quite good at this topic. I'm just saying that not every congregation is on this particular topic, and statistically, when 25% of that congregation has a diagnosis or should have a diagnosis, churches should be a whole lot better at it.
Yeah, I have a small experience to share. I've not been an anxious or depressed person my whole life, but in the last congregation I was serving at, there was just a lot going on. There were people that were in the church that were very difficult to deal with, and they had their own mental illness issues as well. I was expecting my first child, or my wife was expecting her first child, but of course I was expecting that child as well. Yeah. And then there was a whole bunch of stress. I was not healthy. I was extremely overweight, and all these things came up on me. And on Sunday morning, I had a full-blown panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack. And then, of course, I never was the same again. And there's always sometimes that anxiousness that when you get into the pulpit, oh no, am I going to have another one of these? And that's the worst thought to have. Luckily, it's been really good here because it's a lower stress, way lower stress situation, and there's really loving and supporting people around me here in my present congregation.
Yep.
But it's not really been an issue here at all. But I know that the Sunday after I had the panic attack, someone came up to me and said, "It's okay that you had it." But this was the worst thing they could have said. they came up to me and said, "It's okay that you had it, but don't ever have another one. And that makes it totally worse." So then the next Sunday, your heart's like pumping. It feels like someone's punching you in the stomach during the full sermon, but the Lord brought me through it. And
yeah.
this is where on your podcast, I don't want to say I disagreed, but I felt that a lot of those problems were caused by myself not being healthy. And in some senses, it was a lack of faith. But I'm not going to say that anyone else's was. But I feel at that point in my life, I felt that I wasn't trusting in the Lord. I allowed things to blow up. But you know what? It was a pivotal point where I started to get healthy with my life again and able to not allow situations to escalate. So I'm not.
You're saying that in hindsight, though. You're looking back and going, I know I was doing this and I know I was doing that, and I think it's a false connection that you might be making, Adam, saying that you somehow brought this on by your behaviors. I would disagree with you now.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's just what I thought was my experience, right?
Yep.
But environment does create, as I've looked at it and analyzed this to death, environment can create anxiousness in your life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
Certain people can create you to be anxious.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And yeah, so that was that. So basically, what causes them? I'm not saying you can disagree with me because I'm the farthest from an expert. I do, yeah. But how would you say what causes them then? What causes the panic attack?
Oh.
$1 million question.
Yeah, if there was a known cause for myself, I wouldn't have them. I was doing counseling last year, and I had, I don't know, maybe 10 sessions, once a month over the course of 10 months. And when I first went in for my first session, and I said 20% of the time I can figure out what causes the panic attack. And those 20% of the times I can get on top of it, but 80% of the time I'm just along for the ride. And it wasn't until about half a year in that the counselor sort of just threw out everything we had done so far because he realized that I was right. That for myself personally, there were, for the majority of the times, there were no triggers, nothing at all. Zero spark for the fire, unexplained, no way to tell, so therefore no way to change my life circumstances, my environment, anything like that to be on top of it. So, yeah, it's certain things can cause it, but then there's times where nothing at all causes it. And Dean, you referenced this past Sunday. Was there anything that caused it, or was it just sort of out of the blue?
For me, it was completely out of the blue. Again, I can look back and go, well, a couple of things were going on, but that's a typical Sunday morning in the church, and Adam, you can speak to that. People, 3 minutes before service saying, I want to make an announcement, and all those typical things that happen, those typical things were happening. For some reason, toward the end of the 9 o'clock service, I started to get really in a bad spot, and for the first part of the 11 o'clock service, so that little kind of window in the middle there, I ended up in my office in the dark, just sort of getting my act together. And that's something that we could talk about too, we can talk all day about what causes them, but it's probably more profitable to talk about what you do when it happens.
Okay, yeah, that was my third question.
Okay.
How do you deal with them? Because that's what I've called this hangout. How do you deal with them? And people are going to experience different variations of anxiety and all that. And of course, we're going to take a Christian angle on this, although I've learned some from dealing with anxiety from secular people as well. But let's talk about that.
Scott, talk about self-talk.
Self-talk? Okay, yeah, actually, it's funny because you were before sort of the person who brought that up more so, and you had done it more so than I had. I actually ended up having to do that the other day because I thought of you. What would Dean do?
Do you have a bracelet that says that?
I've got it etched on a necklace. Don't worry. I was driving along and I was having this panic attack as I was driving, or it was really starting, and so I started using self-talk, and self-talk was okay. You know, you aren't going to get in an accident. Someone's not going to just drive out of their, you know, through a red light and smash into you. Nothing's going to happen when you get where you're going. There's no issues. You know, you've driven before. Blah 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 blah. And self-talk was just like very simplistic statements, very simplistic truths, and to sort of say it out loud at first can feel almost childlike, like, you know, the minimalistic kind of response to something that feels like such a crisis. But it actually does help and ground you, talking it out, verbalizing it, because it's doing two things. You're realizing that there's less to worry about than you're making up, and two, you're focusing on something else. You're focusing on having that conversation. And a lot of grounding techniques, all they are is just changing your focus so that your attention is not on what's causing the anxiety.
Right. Self-talk feels weird, and I'm sure it looks even weirder, but I have to say, you know, I'm a fan of it, and I've certainly had the benefit of it. Now again, a person could say, well, isn't that just prayer? You're just being reassured, and I guess perhaps, but I'm not praying to myself. I'm talking to myself. I'm assuring myself, and some of the self-talk can be, you know, Christ is in you. Christ is with you. Mm-hmm. Christ is holding you. So, I mean, that self-talk can be reinforcing the spiritual side and strengthening that side at the same time. The other thing that we talked about on our podcast was what I called square breathing. And it kind of picks up on what Scott just said about focusing on other things. The square breathing is the idea that you start to breathe in a very rhythmic, square kind of way. Now on the podcast, I used a count of 2. So breathe in, count of 2, hold, count of 2, exhale, count of 2, hold, count of 2. The problem that someone said to me after that is 2 is not long enough. That basically what I gave was a recipe for hyperventilating.
But I think the key, though, is that everyone's going to be different, and so any tips or advice, like Dean has said, and we've said on our podcast, we're just people who have experienced it and know others that have experienced it. So any tip that we give is from our own personal circles, ourselves included. So I definitely say that, you know, if that is too quick or even too slow for someone, you modify it.
Sure.
You do what you can.
Do a 4 count, do a 6 count.
Yeah, but the purpose is exactly what Dean was saying, is it's giving you something to focus on, and a lot of times the first thing that goes in a panic attack is your breathing. It becomes very irregular. You're not getting enough oxygen. That leads to feeling faint, feeling dizzy, feeling disoriented, feeling with like you have weak legs. So the square breathing really helps on a number of fronts.
Part of that too, and we won't spend as much time on this, but it's something that Scott has mentioned on the podcast is kind of a sensory inventory. When you're sitting there and all of a sudden your body has just lit up because of an anxiety or a panic attack, you start to do a sensory assessment. You start to focus on what you can hear. You start to focus on what you can smell. You start to focus on what you can see. And you start doing those inventories, and suddenly you're looking at and thinking about other things other than what's going on inside you. And I think that's not a bad tool as well.
Yeah. Then there's other simple things. Just counting backwards from 100. I know that process can help some people out. Even doing any kind of math, trying to think of all the ascending prime numbers, anything really, because with those grounding techniques, that's what it's about, is setting your mind on a goal or a task that really is all about keeping your mind off of this perceived danger or perceived threat that's causing the anxiety attack.
Breath
go ahead.
prayers are another thing, Adam. Breath prayers, just those short little, lead on, O King Eternal. Just a short little breath prayer that you can say, and that you can say, and that you can say, and suddenly you're focusing on God. You're focusing on His leadership, and you're not focusing on what's going wrong inside you at the moment. And I mean, again, that can only be helpful, to be focused on the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a time where I went to someone to get advice, or I guess it was counseling, although it wasn't helpful except for the one thing that he said. This is going back 4 years ago, where he suggested that while I'm preaching, have a cross in my pocket and remind yourself. And I don't even think the guy was a Christian. It was quite remarkable, and I thought it was a good reminder, that the Lord is with you. And it's amazing that you would get a secular person saying that to you, but that's what he said.
Yep.
I kind of modified it to the point where, because it took me a while to settle down after that incident, where I'd put Bible verses in my pocket. And if I start to, it's amazing that what your mind can do. You're preaching and that you're having this anxiety attack, and then you're thinking while you're preaching about the verse in your pocket. Anyways, kind of multitasking, but I always found
nice.
I started to get anxious at one point where I didn't have the verse in my pocket, and then now, of course, I don't bring the verse. I do carry verses in my pocket sometimes, but I don't start freaking out when I don't have it.
Yeah.
I found that helpful. Verses in your pocket that remind you of God's goodness, God's sovereignty, and as well, when I had that problem there during the sermon, I went to see a naturopathic doctor because, believe it or not, I went to a medical professional or a normal doctor, and can you guess what they prescribed for me?
Valium.
Valium.
Really?
Valium.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh
Valium.
my goodness.
And I did a little bit of research on Valium, and I don't think I needed Valium at all. I looked at it and I was like, highly addictive, and I said, is this the route that I really want to go, that I can get addicted to Valium? And so I went to a naturopathic doctor, because let's face it, naturopathic doctors are usually better on the preventative for the most part.
Okay.
And she did all those things. She gave me a list of these sheets of breathing. She said breathing in for 4, but then she said build your way up to 8. And then she had other breathing techniques where you breathe in with your left nostril, hold out with your right nostril. And what happens, I found, when you're focusing on the breathing, you're not focusing upon, oh, am I having heart problems and all that other stuff. You're focusing on the breathing.
Yes.
And it's not, I guess some people might be listening to this and might watch this and say, oh, Adam's gone Buddhist. No, I haven't. It's breathing is something that's very good for you in calming your body down. And I never once thought I was doing any sort of Buddhism or meditation or any sort of yoga. You weren't closing your mind. And often you're thinking about the Lord and His
you're inviting Him
and His
into
mercy.
It. Yeah. Just inviting Him into it. That's right.
But maybe someone who's got really bad, like for instance, let's say, we'll ask Dean and Scott this. The fellow that I met was afraid to go outside. And he came to you guys, or he listened to your podcast, and he says, apart from seeking maybe professional help, what kind of pastoral or Christian advice would you give to this guy?
I'm awful at that. Because so much of it at the time can just seem like platitudes, can just seem like placating. It just I had very, very severe depression, and it almost didn't matter what people said on the spiritual level. For me personally, it didn't carry the weight that it should have. I don't know if Dean, if you sort of had that as well, but and I think mostly because at that point in my life, the most real thing to me was God anyway. So I mean, I only had one thing to cling on that was keeping me alive, and that was my relationship with Jesus. So anything that someone said that was spiritualizing or spiritual encouragement, like when you're clinging to a a life preserver and the waves are rough and everything like that, it doesn't matter else what someone's paddling around you shouting out encouragements. Doesn't matter. Like, at least that was my experience, and I know other people can have different ones where getting that spiritual encouragement can really help. But I think it was just where I was, and the fact that my relationship with God was a do or die sort of situation, that I didn't take anything from that.
I think what I would do, what I might try and do anyway in a case like that, Adam, is I'd kind of come to an agreement or an arrangement with that person. I'm going to come over and hang out at your house with you, but then the next time you got to come with me and we're going to go for coffee. And so you're not just saying, well, once you get your act together, then we can hang out. Once you get your act together, then I can start investing in you. You invest in them where they are. You meet them where they are. And it may be come over and watch a movie. It may be come over and just have a cup of coffee, sit on the back deck, or whatever it is that the person is doing themselves that's keeping them at home, that's the most comfortable thing for them. You join them in that, but then with the encouragement that, well, now you have to join me in my thing. Let's go down to Tim's. And we joke about the movie What About Bob, but but it's baby steps, right? Baby steps. You just start small. You don't throw them in the car and say we're going camping for the weekend. Just start with a coffee for an hour down the street, and then come back home to where it's safe again.
Yeah, once around the block. Just, 5-minute walk around the block, stuff like that. It's, as somebody who does have a difficult time going outside, it's as least threat as the less threats there are involved, the better. So, like Dean said, it's that personal. The one-on-one is good. If you say, "Hey, there's 15 of us going shooting pool somewhere," that's usually probably a bad thing, because who are these people and all that stuff.
Anything could happen. Yeah.
Anything could happen. But I think Dean's points were very, very good.
So I have a question for Scott, because I often meet many people that don't want to come to church because they're afraid of crowds. Are you able to go to church then?
Luckily, thanks to our church membership rules, I don't have to. So
explain it.
So basically, to be a member at Queensway Baptist Church in Brantford, Ontario, there's 3 different options you have, and you have to fulfill 2 of them. There's be a part of a small group, be involved in ministry, or attend a Sunday service. So I get to be involved in ministry and go to small groups. So luckily I don't have to. Now, church services, I wouldn't go to. The only time I go to them is when I'm on the soundboard, and otherwise there's no way. I have a hard enough time going to my small group where I know the people accept me, where I know they understand me, where I know that they're open to hearing things and they're non-judgmental. I have a difficult enough time going to that. So I think the church service as an end game for somebody who's having a hard time going out, that may be a bit of a big sell. That there may be other routes into the church that may be best, because the church service itself is not an inviting place for an agoraphobe. especially, and churches love having people, and it's a great thing to have people at the doors greeting you. But when you're agoraphobic and you're walking up to the door, I know I've planned to just wait until they're busy talking to someone else, and then I sneak past them so I don't have to talk to the greeters.
We've even talked on the podcast, Adam, about, and it's a real thing. I mean, think about the way that we do church. Come in, sit down, face front. Some talking head talks for an hour, and then you go. When someone is susceptible to anxiety or panic attacks, and you say, okay, I'm going to put you in the middle of a crowd where you're going to be completely spotlighted if you have to get up and leave, everyone's going to turn and look at you, because that's exactly what happens.
Yep.
Who would willingly put themselves in that position? And so, as I say, back to my answer to your previous question, we just need to meet people where they are. We got our heads around in our church buildings, and legislation helped with that we needed to make them accessible, and we needed to make accommodations for people with physical challenges. I would argue that we now need to make them accessible and make accommodations for those with mental challenges.
So back to Scott. How could church change so that you would go? Would it be a room where you wouldn't see anybody, or?
Well, there's multiple reasons why I don't go, or I have a problem with the modern church structure as it is, just from, I guess, philosophical level. But it's hard to say what the answer would be, because it's going to be a room full of people, and you never know, and your mind creates scenarios that are going to run rampant. And if you have a bad experience, all it takes is one bad experience, like Dean mentioned, not feeling like it's an accessible building, being told. I've been at a church where I sat at the back, in the back row, so I could get out if I had a panic attack, and I was told by an usher to move and sit in the middle of the church so that someone else could have the back row if they needed it. And I got up and I walked out, just because I wasn't prepared to be that person who just got up in the middle of the service and walked out right through everyone.
That wasn't at Queensway, was it?
No, it wasn't at Queensway.
Uh,
If I'm walking out at Queensway, it's got nothing to do with anxiety. It's got to do with the teaching. That's.
Oh. It's remarkable, because we do a lot of engaging people here in Dryden, or we haven't as much late, but we had up until the last couple of months. And it's even in West Lorne as well, where I was at. I met an enormous amount of people that were afraid of crowds, and I often didn't know how to. I don't know how to take that to the next level, because it's just very difficult. If you're afraid of crowds, it makes life in church very difficult, especially when you don't have small groups, and not everyone understands these things.
So, there are still churches that on a Sunday morning they'll say, if you're a visitor here, stand up. And I mean, can you imagine? Stand up and walk out.
I've been at a church like that, and I snuck out.
Yeah. I mean, not helpful at all. Not helpful.
Well, I never skip church. Even on vacation, I go somewhere.
Yep.
And I found I'm kind of I don't know what you would call me. I'm shy initially, but after I know someone, I'm not as shy. I become extroverted, or whatever you want to call me. But that's how I see myself. Is initially I'm shy. Yep. Then once I'm comfortable, I'm extremely outgoing, extroverted, whatever you want to call it. But when I go to a church and they do that greeting part, it just really bothers me. I don't like it. I feel uncomfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, yeah, I can sympathize with certainly that, and And but if you know everybody there, it's different. But I know a lot of churches seem to want to do that. And that would that create, back to Scott, let's say you were at church.
Yeah.
And they went full blown, like 2-3 minutes, and you need to greet everyone around you. How would that make you feel?
If there was coffee at the back, I'd go for coffee.
Okay, so you wouldn't even go in.
Yeah, it's just a lot of pressure. Anytime you're sort of put on the spot, forced to be social for someone who's got anxiety, that can be just a very bad thing. I hate to do this, but I do have to run at the moment.
Well, we can close her off there.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. We went, or we've bored everybody, or we'll bore everybody tomorrow or whenever if they want to watch this. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Hey, it's great.
I won't, and again, check out their podcast. It's called Mind Matters. You got to find them on Facebook. So go to Facebook. Do you have a Twitter?
No.
No, but you can find us in the iTunes store under podcasts, Mind Matters. And there's also links to our stuff on our church website, which is...
Yeah, so what's the church website?
Queensway.org.
Queensway.org. Okay. Everybody, God bless, and we'll talk to you guys soon.